So thank you. Tonight I will be presenting more of an abbreviated version of the budget reduction plan that you saw a couple weeks ago, and that was presented at the community forum for this evening. Okay, so we did update the budget process timeline. Pretty much everything is the same. We started off this process back in early December. Moving forward with some budget presentations and having individuals within our school district understand a little bit more about school finance. And then those teams work together, staff and administrators worked together to come up with, generate ideas. They worked within their buildings to come up with ideas and engaged other stakeholders. And then we moved forward and began then coming up with ideas. Those were processed back in the early January. Then we had a review of the containment ideas done through a process going forward with that, and then of course bringing those forward to the school board, as well as bringing them forward to the community forum. So tonight is the board review of the containment. But coming up, we will have some additional community forum opportunities for individuals in our community. So February 13th, and I'll talk about all of these a little bit later on, February 18th, and then February 19th. And those will be in East Union, Chaska, and then at the Victoria Rec Center. So you saw this slide before, but I'll review it again. Since 2008-09 school year, the school district has made budget cuts and contained cost. During this 10-year period, the school board worked hard to keep cuts away from the classroom. In the slide, you see two bars. The blue bar represents the percent of cuts made in each area. Almost 23% of the 10 million cuts were made in administration. For instruction, it was 26.4%. Instructional pupil support, 19.4%, and so on. The orange checkered bar shows the amount of the overall budget that each area represents. For instance, instruction represents about 45% of the general fund's budget. This difference between the blue bar and the orange bar, the blue bar at 26.4%, and the orange bar at almost 45% demonstrates that the school board implemented cuts during this 10-year period that stayed away from the classroom and instead made cuts elsewhere. So now we'll look at the budget reduction plan. And if you, there were some documents to pick up at the front of the media center here. So this is just a summary of those of that plan. There's more detailed on your sheet, but for instance, the supply budget falls within all of the various categories, but on here we'll do it as a summation of that. So the first item listed on there is to negotiate a pay freeze. In 2021, the district will work with our non-teaching groups to negotiate a soft freeze. Basically, no steps, longevity, and lanes will occur, but no new money to the salary schedule. This will be done district-wide, and it amounts to $690,000. Teachers are on alternating years from the other groups, and we'll show that on the next slide. Supply budgets will be, there'll be no inflationary increase. In fact, it'll be a decrease, and it'll save $286,000. At the high school, a 6-period day is proposed and would save $1.6 million and reduce teaching staff by 18, but we'll need to add 6 paraprofessionals for supervision, which was previously handled by the teachers. This will bring a net reduction of 12 FTEs. In the middle school, there's a proposal to restructure the teaching schedule, which would impact the number of students a teacher has during the school year. This would save just under $1 million with a reduction of 10 teachers. At the elementary school, it is proposed to increase class size by 1.5 students. This would reduce teaching staff by 10.65 and save $1.1 million. It's proposed to have a one-time underspending of operating capital of nearly $480,000, which affects nearly every category. With this plan, we'll see a restructuring of technology with a savings of $335,000 and 3 FTEs. Increasing high school fees includes increases in parking fees, graduation fees, and gate admissions. The other category includes a decrease in the communications department, reallocation of resources to cover expenses in instruction and in operations. Special education is proposing to reduce paraprofessionals by adjusting their hours for a savings of $133,000. And then finally, the Buildings and Grounds Department will restructure custodial staff and save about $221,000 for a total of $6 million. In the second year of the plan, in 21-22, the district is proposing to again work to negotiate a soft freeze, this time with our teaching staff. This plan proposes to close East Union in 21-22. With this proposal, the students and teaching staff would be moved to other schools. Boundaries would need to be redrawn to accomplish this. The $548,000 savings stems from the core operating costs, custodians, electricity, principal, secretary, etc. The next line is the G&T, which stands for Gifted and Talented. It's proposed to cut Gifted and Talented by 1 FTE and also cut 1 foreign language program at the high school. Next, a cut of 2.14 FTE and 80,000 in paraprofessionals is proposed in year 2. A restructuring of a TOSA, or Teacher on Special Assignment, would save $60,000. As presented to the school board in July 2019, bringing transportation in-house will save $200,000 in year 1, and in the following year, another $400,000. Proposed for 21-22 is also to increase facility rental fees and athletic and activity fees by 10 to 15%. Finally, the other includes reallocation of resources, a reduction of a school resource officer at the middle school level, and reallocation of QComp to the teacher schedule. So now if we look at that same chart and include the budget reductions that we talked about on the previous pages, you'll see that the blue bar now, especially on the instruction side, have been raised and more across the areas. They are all pretty much on a level playing field. We still have some underweighting in instruction as well as special education, and that's okay. Always promoting to keep less away from the classroom. So now if we move on to the next slide, these are proposed future budget reductions. So the items listed on both phase 1 and phase 2 are possibilities for moving forward to year 2 of the plan. What will occur in phase 1 out of the $2.8 million is the nutrition services, a transfer of $550,000. If their fund balance supports that will occur. That can only occur once every 3 years. Phase 2 of the instruction insourcing transportation, or year 2 I should say, will add an additional $400,000. From then forward on that same column, additional class size would be a half a student in elementary and 1 full student at the high school, or secondary, excuse me. Teacher on special assignment would include restructuring some instructional and PL coaches. Then the final one is changing the bell time, adding some additional time to every day and reducing the school days. In this agreement, that would include some restructuring that would need to occur with the teacher contract. So moving over to the right-hand side then, a total of $1.8 million. Administration, changing deans to lead teacher. It's a decrease, a high school assistant principal. The reason this is out in phase 2 is because there would, again, need to be some changes made with the observation and evaluations of teachers, which affects their contract. Restructuring vocal and instrumental music at the elementary for $300,000, Decrease clerical days for 163. Increasing the walk zone, that would save $130,000. For elementary, that would move from a half a mile to a mile. Secondary, from 1 mile to 2 miles. Other includes some reallocation in special education, which is related to third-party billing, and then decreasing supply budget, which is to eliminate the district-paid ACT. So at the community forum on January 29th, we divided up after the presentation was given in the auditorium. Then we divided up into 5 categories. And those included, as you can see, class size, 6-period day at the high school, middle school changes in their teaching schedule, East Union closure, and then other topics. In each of the rooms, school board member, a district administrator, principal, and on almost every category, a teaching and learning staff were there to listen. So on the next slide, you'll note a summary of each room and the participants. I'll ask each school board member to review what they heard, and other staff that are here that were part of that group to also participate if possible.
So Dee Dee, I'll just jump in real quickly too. This is an important part of the process here for you as a board. So, you know, as we get to the 24th and that final decision, tonight is important to have that discussion about what you heard, what you've been hearing, questions that you still have, any additional data that you still need. You know, what are the items that we still need to consider as we look at making final recommendations on the 24th. So it's really, again, important that you all have an opportunity to have that dialogue, feedback to us, and feedback to some of our budget team, so we know what other information we can get to you, so you're prepared for the 24th, and we can ensure you're in a good place for that. Okay? Okay.
So class size, you can see the district representatives on the left, and some of the, just briefly, the feedback and concerns that were heard in that category. It doesn't comprehend every single question that they had, but there was common themes within that. So I will turn it over to Mr. Berg.
Okay, I'll just hit the 3 talking points that I've got here that maybe elaborate a little bit more. The first one was, it's important to remember that class size is based on an average. Some class sizes may be smaller, some larger, depending upon the number of students enrolled in a particular grade level or section. Traditionally, at the high school level, for example, the required courses are larger because everyone has to take them. So that just by definition increases the size there. The next point was, increased class size can impact the academic experience, social, emotional needs, and opportunities to know each student. Again, that speaks for itself. If you've got 3 or 4 or 2 or 1 extra students, you don't have any more time in the day to be able to deal with those students on as much of an individual basis as you may if the class was a little smaller. And lastly, larger class size increased teacher workloads, not just for teaching and assessment, but the time and energy required to manage students. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the story of my wife, who taught in Bloomington and taught English, and her major concern with increased class sizes was the fact that instead of giving 5 major papers, she was able to give 3. She just didn't have time to correct the papers and truly correct them. You've all been in classes, I'm sure, where you thought maybe the teacher just threw the papers up and the ones that landed face side up got an A, and you'd got no constructive criticism. Well, that's not what good teaching is about, and that's not what we do here. And it's difficult with a class size to be able to, and that's just one example. I taught American government, and to be able to do exercises that demonstrate how government works, it's difficult if you've got so many students that crowd control almost becomes more of a problem than what you're teaching. So these are the ones I've got here anyway. If you would like to talk later, we can do that. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Are there any other questions that the board might have for this group?
What was the makeup of the audience for this one? Was it mostly elementary, or?
We didn't poll or anything, but my sense was that it was more elementary than it was secondary.
And any particular area or schools that Did you get a feel for geography?
I didn't really, no. It was pretty much by age, or grade, not necessarily where they were from.
I know that class size has been a real issue for this community, and that's been something that we've held tight on for as long as I've been on the board, so this is a tough one.
I do know, and Fred, you can elaborate on this too, there were some questions around how that 1.5 actually worked. There was some confusion, at least for one parent, that it was taking class size and multiplying it by 1.5. So you might go from 30 to 45, right? And so there was an opportunity for folks in the room to talk about, especially at the elementary level, we already have kind of a staggered class size. So at kindergarten, we're at 20.5 currently. And that increases as the grade levels go up. So as we get to the kind of those upper grades, I believe it's like 27 in that range. So for kindergarten, it would be adding that 1.5 student onto that formula of 20.5, so it'd be 22. So we take all the kindergarten kids in that particular building, divide it by 22, and that's the kindergarten kind of staffing for that building. You add all of the grade levels together, and that kind of gives you your total staffing. And then their principals work really closely with HR and the district office to, it never comes out quite perfectly, and so they make some adjustments from there. So it just bumps that up by 1.5 all the way through that formula.
And there was a recognition by the parents that were there too, that's where they felt, and they were looking at their own territory, but there was that feeling that we had to protect as best we could the numbers at the elementary level. That's obviously where it all begins, and those of you who have gone through the process know that while all 12 grades, 13 grades are significantly important, if you don't get a good start, it's very difficult to come back. And that was a concern that was overlaying the whole discussion.
Are we asking questions now or at the end? Have we gotten any sense on, with the proposed increase of class sizes, how that would compare with some of our neighboring districts at all?
We have a study that's done by the Metro EXU on a yearly basis, and we can use that as a reference. What I'll tell you is sometimes you have to be careful what you see in that data is self-reported. There are some districts who report like all staff in the building divided by the number of students, and we know that's not necessarily true class size. But what I would say is even with that increase in 1.5, we're still within that range because it is a pretty large margin there, from as low as 18 to as high as 28 in some districts. So we'd still be in that range from kindergarten kind of all the way up through the system.
I mean, we've looked into that before.
The challenge is you have districts that, try to put more of a marketing spin on it, and some that, is factual reporting, and it's hard to discern. It's not, unlike a lot of things we have to report, as you know, in our budget, it's not something that districts are held to a standard of reporting. So.
Yeah, my point with the question is just to reiterate that this does not put us out on an island in terms of class sizes as it relates to other districts. It does still keep us within a relative sense of class sizes with some of our neighboring districts.
Clint, how many students do we have in the elementary schools altogether? Elementary students?
I do. Second. Sorry, I've got a whole folder of things that you might ask me.
I'm surprised it's so small, actually.
Just under 4,300.
So increasing class size will impact 4,300 students.
Yep.
Is that just because some people have confusion over this ADM versus, few students? Is that?
This is strictly enrollment, so October 1, or actually enrollment as of last Thursday. So kids enrolled in our
4,300
school.
unique people as
Yep.
opposed to a county.
Yep.
Correct.
Great.
So 4,300 students all in elementary.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. you want to move on? Other questions? Okay.
Thanks.
I mean, it's one, the only other, I mean, at the elementary level, I mean, on the other levels, we have different types of programming and that we're looking at altering rather than just a pure class size.
Right.
I guess, was there any, are there any other alternatives rather than class size? I mean, I presume that there, I don't know, there's,
What I would tell you from the feedback, so as we met with building teams, and Dee Dee did her presentation, and we sent that out to them and had them talk about, what other options are. As the elementary teams looked at it, what they came back with was actually to increase class size even a little bit more. And then as we looked at all where the numbers fell out, we kept it at that 1.5. So I think the feeling, at least as I took it, and I know there's some elementary principals here that could probably follow up on that as well, is we want to protect, some of the programs and opportunities that kids have in there, and the way to do that is to continue to kind of move into that class size piece.
and that's just, could you just reiterate, I think, we have a lot of maybe new people that are trying to get information on this, just the budget teams and that configuration, so how was in that process?
Yeah, so to begin with, back in early December, we had each principal and or director form a team, and it was members that were in their school building or in their department come. I think there was probably 150 people at that meeting. Went through the presentation, then they met as individual teams. They might have met that night, or they might have met at different days back at their school or in their department to generate ideas. Many of them had Google Docs so that they could share it across the building and share ideas so that more people could participate as well. And then all of those ideas were then brought forward through their building administrator or principal, and then we reviewed those. Then once we got together as a district leadership team, then we broke it up into elementary principals, middle school principals, high school principals, and then kind of teaching and learning group, community ed, special education, and then kind of operations. And all of those ideas, then we came together with those options, and from there then we met as a cabinet to review those, and then we brought them forward to the district leadership team, and we brought them forward to our internal budget committee, and then brought those recommendations forward to you. So that's been the process. There's been a lot more involvement and a lot more communication than we've had in any other previous reductions that we've made. I mean, this is the largest amount we've made since I've been here, so.
And in fairness, this is impacting students more than.
Correct, yep.
On the phase one, with the additional class size increase there, is that also at the elementary, or is
Yeah,
that
it was an
secondary?
additional half FTE, half student, excuse me, at the elementary and one at the high school, or the secondary level. Yeah.
So how many teachers would be eliminated by this?
Pam maybe could look that up for me, and I can get that in just a second.
Okay.
I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Because I get it, there's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
Just one other, a general comment and just clarification is that on we have the phase one and the phase two
Yes.
groups of additional reductions. So we have, with the I guess I don't know what you call them, but the proposed 21-22 reduction plan. Is that 6 million, I think, in total?
Yeah, 2021 was, the first year is 6 million, and the second year is a little over 3.
A little over 3. So then but as I look, to maintain, if you're at the fund balance, right? I just want to give some context. In phase one and phase two, you've got another 4.6 million
Correct.
of reductions, and just, that is, those will have to be decided at that point in time based on the realities. and the design, and the goals for the fund balance
Right.
percentage, which we don't, that would get us well beyond, if everything goes according to plan, well above the 5+%
Right.
levels. So
Yeah.
it's not, those are, for everyone's understanding, nothing's been decided, but those are options, and as a board, the board at the time will have to determine what level of those items they would want to.
Right. So, as we always do with our budget, we review that and bring back any recommendations for updating that. Next year will be another legislative session to see if we get any additional money. It's possible to get some more money up next year, but we don't know that. So taking those into considerations, that's why we didn't make a hard and fast rule on those third-year ones, that we'll have to look at the situation. And that's how we've done it in the past. We've had kind of a plan and then evaluate that plan going in the future and having some options or ideas that we can bring forward to the board, as Tim said, and then make that part of the plan for that fiscal year.
But the 6 million and then the 3.2 million, those 2 years with those cuts keep us for those two, for next year, which we know our funding level, and the following year, which we don't yet, but
Right.
we're making some assumptions, keeps us above the 5% threshold.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yes.
Let me just clarify one piece too, going back to my comment on the elementary recommendations. I don't want to give the perception that the only recommendation was to increase more class size. There were a lot of recommendations. The largest one, most consistent from the elementaries, was around increasing class size to 2, which we didn't do. We did the 1.5, moved the other 0.5 out to year 3. There was some other pieces that got moved into that. They just weren't necessarily programmatic in nature.
Okay. Should move on to 6th period day. So you can see the district representatives on the left-hand side and then the feedback that is on the right. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Anderson.
I'm not as nice as Fred, so those who are in the room, Jim, Dick, Dan, you can come up here as well. I think we had about 80 parents in there and some students. And the music teachers have done a really nice job of communicating with parents and students the impact that this would have on the music program. So we had a lot of questions around the impact on music. We had a lot of conversation about what is a 6th period day, what does that even mean? Some animated conversation about graduation requirements and how that has changed as well. And basically what I heard, and chime in there, lots of questions on different schedule options, which Jim, I know you and I have talked about, so you can kind of answer the questions on why some of those schedule options were not considered, so I'll call on you for that. But I think at the end of the day in the room, I kind of summarized, what would be the takeaway. And it wasn't necessarily they're opposed to the 6th period day, it's the amount of options that would be reduced. And specifically, as you know, Nick, for music kids, it's much harder. It's difficult to take band and choir and a language and have any other electives. And that's really, that was really the rub in that room. So, Jim, if you might be so kind. And by the way, Dan did a really nice job of explaining why that is a cost savings, just off the top of his head, without visuals, on how the 6th period day does provide us a cost savings. So if you might jump up and share that explanation. Absolutely. See, I'm not as nice as Fred.
My memory is everyone was confused by my explanation, but I'll give it another shot. And the best way to think about it in a really simple sense is what percentage of a teacher day is spent with students is a good handy shortcut for understanding how different schedules save money in different ways. So currently, when teachers are teaching 5 out of 7 periods, they're in front of students roughly 73% of the time. And if you move to 5 out of 6 on a 6-period day, that number jumps to 83%. And so that's what that cost savings is in effect, the number of people they're in front of. Some people have asked about things like a block schedule, where it's a 4-period day and teachers teach 3 out of 4. And in that case, they're 3 out of 4 is 75% of the time. And so you can see that would not really get us anywhere close to what we need to do for cost savings.
Yeah, thank you.
How's that?
Getting better at that.
Thank you.
And then Jim, I think that there was some questions around like a floating day or a 7-period day. And so I know that there were some explanations on why we aren't considering those.
Yeah, that was teaching, it's a 6-period day, having 7 classes, and you rotate the days around was one of the suggestions. We had this many years ago in our district, according to one of the members out there. 2 things. It doesn't increase the teacher load. They're now teaching 6 of 7. So there is a cost savings, but we also have some contractual obligations within there that we're not sure we could actually make that actually work due to some contractual obligations we have. I did reach out to the one person in the community that had talked about different ones.
Yes, thank you.
And he did a podcast and talked about, 5 out of 6, 5.5 out of 7, and then this rotating one, but he didn't have any magical answers for it. He talked about there was a school somewhere in the country that it's kind of a modular type of schedule, but that would take a significant amount of work to look at that, if that would work too.
And I know that you were looking at kind of this modified A-B schedule for band and choir, so can you explain that a little bit, like how that would work?
One of the suggestions when we met with our music department was in 9th grade to do an A-B, opposite personal wellness, and keep it at that level. And they thought, get them accustomed to high school, but then after that, really focus on every day, 10 through 12. We met with them again today, and they're on board with doing that. And that kind of helps offset a class, so they'll do that Phi-Ed and personal wellness. But it could be choir too. They could do some multiple musics in there as well.
Another theme that I heard a little bit of, and similar to Fred, there was some thought by the parents that we should keep the cuts away from the high school because it's the end of their career, and we need to save the cuts from the high school. So it's kind of a theme, and at the end of the day, every level is important. Did I miss anything or do you have any questions?
I have a question. As we look to our RTI and our response to intervention, we've used WIN to give us some in-school real-time help. And have we looked at how that fits into a 6-period day so we can give in-time intervention to students that need it?
Yes, on both buildings, that has been one of the #1 priority by teachers. So yeah, we've looked at some different schedules. We're actually meeting again tomorrow to look at some different options, whether you do straight 6 with the WIN, you do a modified version like we currently have with the WIN session. So WIN is definitely one of our priorities.
And then what about the state mandate for like college and career readiness that we now fit into our personal wellness, where maybe other schools would do it in their homeroom, and since we don't have homeroom, our personal wellness teachers, where would that fit in?
We're still working on this, Dan.
Which teachers would pick that up?
Yeah, we don't have a firm answer on that. Chanhassen has an advisory, and so that's a place where that might come in. There are some districts that have placed those learnings for students in core areas like English, and so in the 6-period day, the amount of instructional time is increasing, and so there might be space to put some of that work into, say, language arts or science or some of these courses that students are taking every year to make sure they get that.
Okay, so there could be some course redesign as well for this.
Yes, it could be.
And Jenny, you bring up a good point, because not just is the WIN time important to teachers, but the students that were in the room were very emphatic about keeping that WIN time. I felt like they were strongly saying do that. And I think the other piece that I had heard is there was some advice given about, courses in the course catalog that we should drop and some that we should keep. And I think that, I think sometimes as adults, we try and regulate and make decisions, but at the end of the day, I think we'll open those course catalogs for kids, and kids will make those decisions on what's important to them, and the course catalog will naturally shrink based upon kids' choices.
Yeah, there was some misunderstanding that we would decide what the schedule would look like in terms of which classes were taught where now. And of course, the way we do that in high school is the kids are registered for those classes, we look at those requests, and then we build the schedule off of those requests. And so that was an important thing for people to get clarified.
Yep.
So I just want to be clear, because I know we've had a lot of different conversations about thinking creatively and outside the box with the 6-period day. For those students, and I know there's not a lot of them, but there are some that want to take a band and an orchestra or and a choir, kind of both of those music tracks, as well as a foreign language, because they're preparing for college. Do we have an option for 6-period day to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, one thing that we looked at, it seems like the pressure points really are where those personal wellness requirements come in. And so Jim already addressed the 9th grade plan, which was to use the every other day AB. And then we're tentatively looking at for junior year, where the other personal wellness credit will come up for a lot of students, is to offer those students who are registered for a full year of world language and a full year of music a chance to take a 7th class for personal wellness, perhaps online. That's often referred to as a 0 hour, because many schools schedule it before the beginning of the school day, but if we did an online class, that could be anywhere. We pulled some data in the last couple of years of how many students have been in that situation, and it's been about, between the 2 high schools together, about 75 students. So we can offer that option for those students who want to continue that music program, continue that world language, and only it would cost us to about, in the end, 0.3 of a teacher. So we can create that flexibility and still retain most of the cost savings. This isn't a firm plan, but we're trying to make sure that's ready to go, because that was a clear message from those students.
So just so I'm clear, when we vote on the 24th, will we know if we are going to offer that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the 75,
Wow.
Was that cumulative over a certain time period? Is that on average every year?
I can give you the exact numbers. In the 18-19 school year, there were 26 students at Chaska in that situation, and 46 at, and 29 at Chan. So that year there were 55. This year, there are 46 at Chaska and 47 at Chan. So 50 last year, 93 this year.
Okay.
So going back to that modified AB day, you said that for freshmen, they'd be able to maybe alternate gym and music, but then for juniors, they said you would need to do a 0 hour instead. Why could they not just do the modified AB again?
This comes from our music department. They really wanted to have those kids every day to keep performing the performance level at a higher rate. That's why.
Okay. And I think the other thing that I heard from the parents is, that they'd be willing to pay for some of those music pieces and those music classes. And I understand that, in some way, I don't know if that's an option. And in some way, until we make some of these decisions, we won't be able to figure out some of the tactics of that. So the sooner we can get that. But do we have any sense on what that would look like, or will we have to wait for the course catalog to kind of shake out?
I think we're going to have to wait for all that to shake out. There was a few parents that mentioned that. I don't know how widespread that would be.
I think also we don't love the idea of music becoming something that, or to be a part of, you're paying this fee. That's
Right.
consistent with our mission. So we'd like to have solutions that don't involve that.
And will you have a plan for the 9th grade? Because if a student isn't taking music, then their PE would be every day, or would it be every other day? So a PE teacher could have an every other day course, and what would they be doing on the off days, and how would that look like, and how would that look equitable, and what would that planning look like? Would they be doing twice as much, replanning their course? Will you have that laid out before we vote?
Likely the personal wellness teacher would teach the band and choir students would alternate. So one day they would have a choir students in personal wellness while the band students are in band, and then the next day they would have the band students in personal
Okay.
wellness while the choir students are in choir. And all the other personal wellness courses would be semester length, every day,
Okay.
standard courses.
So it's great that, I mean, I think we're working the process, right? There's a proposal, there's discussion, there's, we're exploring alternatives. So it's great. Is there, in advance of the 24th, do you envision at a point with which we'll be able to communicate to the community what the proposal will be on the 24th, so that, because there's some people may come to the 24th with a lot of anxiety that may not be needed because their concerns may have been remedied through some of these modifications. What's the thought on the communication as there's refinements or modification,
Are you talking just 6 period day right now? Or are you talking?
Just talking 6 period day now, but I mean, I'm assuming there, to the extent that there may be others, I don't know, but yes.
All of the things that we've discussed will be in the registration guide, which is online. So
Okay.
that'll be one way, I suppose. I don't know.
And I know that, Jim, you were talking about having some listening sessions with students, you and Dick, with some students and answering some of those questions. Have you had a chance, are you scheduling those, or are you just doing it as needed? I mean, what's kind of the plan to communicate any questions to students over the next?
Well, the counselors will start going into classrooms and having those discussions, so they'll be able to answer a lot of them. I did meet with our student advisory last week and spent a good part of today in lunches with kids, so trying to get their feedback. Obviously it's the band world language question that comes in. Surprisingly, the kids aren't that worried about, only taking 6 classes versus 7. But they're trying to still figure out some of that stuff too. We sent out, all the revised credits for everybody. So they're still looking at it. It's really when the counselors go in and start meeting with them before they'll start generating more and more questions. And that starts the next week. Next week.
Back to the music option, I'm really philosophically against charging a student a fee for something that should be provided as part of the package. And I think it's just wrong to eliminate a significant section of the population because they don't have the money to be able to take music. And I think we're doing a terrible disservice if we do that.
And it's completely inequitable. But it was something they offered up, so I was just trying to address the questions.
No, I know you're not supporting it, I just want to be on record.
No, I think that's.
Yep, that's fair.
I have a question about registration. I know that kids self-register on Infinite Campus now, and I'm concerned now that we don't have the requirement for foreign language. And parents and students, this may, have happened in my house, have agreed on a schedule, and then junior or juniorette goes in and registers for the schedule they want, and then parents they didn't see it. What are we doing to ensure that those conversations are happening around the foreign language in the secondary building? I know you said that counselors would be meeting, but kids can still just go on and register and be done. It doesn't ever go back to the family for a check-in.
Yeah, we assume that the parents are involved and we hope.
I just don't want to assume a 14-year-old is making a great decision.
Well,
Okay.
you can see it on Portal. You
Right.
can
Yeah, I
see
was
their
gonna say.
registration,
Right.
and you can see
But I
it.
mean, you can see it, and then their kid can go in and change it.
But I
So
mean,
that's what I'm
I
concerned
guess
with.
how much, we have limited resources.
Right. Yeah.
And we're trying to take care of these kids every day and doing our best. It's hard to, for us to be at the kitchen table, I mean, we're dealing with limited resources. I
know.
understand what you're saying, but,
I'm just concerned about kids falling through the cracks.
No, yep.
and maybe that's a thought, and there's maybe some different communication needs to, maybe some additional communication needs to be a part of it this year, given
Given that
the
there's
nature of the
changes this
changes.
year.
Just to help the families figure it out. So,
Good suggestion, yeah.
okay. One last question on the 6 period day, and I think, I think we've discussed quite a bit how this is very standard, and an alternative down the road, if there's ever an opportunity, hopefully there will be, to have more resources to provide more opportunities for kids again. That with this 6 period day being a common structure within high schools, peer high schools, how do you add additional programming? And maybe you can, just explain the 0 hour kind of alternative, how that
Yeah, a
works.
number of high schools that do the 6-period day have 0 hour, which then they add, like, they can add AP classes or different classes, so that kids come in before school to take those, and that's the way they've allowed for kids to have more choice in taking those different classes. There is an expense to the district in doing that, but those are options that we've looked at a lot of different districts. Jefferson, on the other hand, doesn't offer a 0 hour. They increased their online presence to have kids come in and do more online classes that they control, not going outside the district, but they've built it within, and that's another variable that we'll be looking at as well.
Yes, I figured out our neighbors to the north, they must have a 0 hour because their parking lot's pretty full at 7 a.m.
How does the 6-period day coincide with the Integrated Arts Academy, with their schedule?
Tara's here.
Tara's here.
Because the Integrated Arts Academy is, has 80 students and their own 6-period day right now that works really, really closely with the high schools in order to flex and move so that we can get our kids to anything that they want to go to or any of the opportunities that they want to go to. We'll just work closely with the high schools to make sure if we need to switch our schedule a little bit in order to make sure that they get to the classes and opportunities they need, that we can. And so as of right now, just the nature of our program allows us to be really flexible. So I don't think at this time there'll be huge impact to it because we can be flexible.
Other questions? Okay. So we'll move on to middle school changes. And you can see, again, yep, the district representative. So and the feedback again on the right. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Dee Dee. So I had, in our room, we had Jim O'Connell, we had, who's our district administrator for personnel, we had Beth Holm, who's our middle school East principal, Dana was there from Pioneer, and then Nate Slendy was the scribe, taking notes. We had in the room 30 to 40, would be my guess. It was predominantly staff. There was, in particular, one building that was heavily represented, and the conversation really revolved around two different themes. One is a group of core teachers predominantly who were concerned about the workload because it is a greater workload. And then there were the extras teachers, the arts, et cetera, who were concerned, about kids having options. There was some, comment from parents. I mean, there's, I think, an acknowledgement, understanding that middle school is, an important time of a person's life to have more options as they're still more formative and trying to figure things out. So but that was really the crux of the discussion, the feedback that we got from people is the strains that those create. You're either going to, keep the workload consistent, go to a 6-period day, or you increase the workload and increase options. So those are the 2 points that I heard, and there was a strong, it was obviously very strong opinions on both sides, and there was a plea to look at creative solutions. I don't know if there's been any. There was some discussion about the scheduling's already kind of complicated, but there was some suggestions around can you be creative? Could you do 5.5, with the extras and increase class sizes with the core? I don't know if there's been any, that was one suggestion that was up. But I'll leave it to the other members that were there. Any other observations or thoughts that you had from the session? Jim, Dana, Nate, I captured everything.
I think you did. It really comes down to the options. Trying to keep that, a 7-period day. But it's, as you mentioned, the 5.5. Teachers are concerned about that because they've got an additional class for a semester, or they're doing the AB option. They also, the last meetings, they talked about the AB option with like teaching 5 days in a row to kind of shorten the number of transitions that you have, because the original AB option was on that 6th class that they're teaching to be doing that every other day. And then this new option was, at the start of the year, you teach Monday, Tuesday. The next teacher, does Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday. You get 5 days, and then you're on that 5-day schedule. So that's just a different way to do that AB. But yeah, it's kind of options, versus, on the 6-period day. And we just heard what, some of the questions are with the 6-period day. And I think no matter what you do, it's going to be tough. Okay, and I think that was voiced with either option.
Why 5.5 versus 6-period day? Why is the recommendation of the 5.5 versus 6-period day? You can give that to Dana, Cheryl.
Again, I think the main reason between that was trying to preserve middle school model and philosophy. So if you go to a 6-period day, we look just like the high school. And so we're a junior high, and that middle school programming that this district's been committed to forever is essentially not there anymore. And so the commitment was there's a difference between a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old. We can't offer later a 0 hour. That's not really realistic at a middle level, because they can't really get themselves there and that kind of thing. So we were looking at a way to short gap this, to find a solution that could be good for a couple of years, and then hope and see what another referendum or state funding or whatever comes together, and see then if that could return us to a more palatable workload. And then the other piece of that was, if not, it gives us time to look at what are those creative solutions out there that other schools, we've heard of, like 7-period day, but on a 6-day rotation. So you'd rotate off a day. And so we've heard all kinds of creative solutions like that, but that's just not something we can pull out of our hat at this point in time. So that was our reasoning behind that.
Go ahead.
I was wondering why we didn't look at if staying with 7 classes and the middle school model of choice is that important, why didn't we look at adding students and staying in the 7-period model, adding 3 students, increasing class size 3 to 3.5? I'm just wondering, because that wouldn't teach teacher load, but if they're still only teaching 5, that's 15 kids, not 32 kids. I mean, I just took a day off to grade 120 papers because I didn't get it done all day Saturday grading, all day Sunday, and all day Monday. So I am very concerned about teacher workload adding 30 to 35 more. But 10, could we do that?
We did meet with our middle schools last week, and we did look at options, and that is a question that we heard, and you heard Dee Dee address that at the last board meeting as well. In order to get close to, not quite to, but close to the savings that the 5.5 provides, we would need to add 4.5 students per class. I think what's important to note with that is you still add nearly the same number of students, but you add it every day, all year long. We also know that currently we've protected core classes at the middle level, so language arts, math, science, social studies often, and those classes typically are below the 30.5 average class size. And our encore and our elective classes have been having class sizes that are more like that 34, 35. So in exercising a 4.5, and we talked about this with the middle level, you would be actually in some cases increasing class sizes significantly more. If a language arts teacher has 27 students right now, they could add 7 or 8 students to get to that average 34, 35, depending on the schedule. We know kids don't come in nice even bundles. An encore class teacher might only see similar or one more, but you can't go to 40 students in a middle school class.
I mean, there is preserving choice, but I'm worried about quality. Back to Fred's analogy where when you have so many kids, then you don't offer as many assessments. You're not giving as much feedback. And I worry about that. I worry, while we want to maintain choice, where is the quality going? And I worry about the burden on our teachers, just because this is what I do every day, 12 hours a day. And so I am concerned about the quality.
Is there, how do we, in terms of the buildings and the climate and with the teacher feedback, I think, Clint, are we getting more feedback from teachers to assess what their concerns are on workload, or feel, at least what the receptiveness is to James' point?
We really have done 2 things. As we met with them last week, one of the things that we heard previously when we met with the CEA and the administrative team leadership collectively at the middle level was, are there some things we could do different that would address some of the workload or continue to support teachers in creating the balance and being able to prioritize things that are more important. And we've gathered that information, and a lot of the things are things we've looked at, like what's the minimum we can have for supervision as we consider that. Lots of suggestions around when, advisory, how we schedule the teacher's day, in terms of when we have a PD day, could there be opportunities or prioritizing of collaboration time, opportunities to incentivize teachers who are doing lunch supervision, PLCs, how they might structure those differently. So really looking at all the things that are part of the teacher's work and the teacher's day, and how might we look at that differently. Because we just did that last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, our middle school team hasn't had a chance to digest that yet and really get a sense of those priorities. The other thing that we did do was Friday, the middle school principals worked with the group of us from the district, and we put together a survey to get some teacher input and to get a sense of where our teachers at. And because the increasing class size option continued to come up, we included that also as we asked for their feedback. And as I guess the feedback included an opportunity to look at teachers teaching 5.5 out of 7, teaching 5 out of 6, so a 7-period day, a 6-period day, or increasing class size by 4.5, and an opportunity to complete a 4-point Likert scale from strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. We also did ask teachers to rank order those 3 options for 2nd and 3rd. We did ask about, in the event that we would do a 5.5 out of 7, what schedule or option would they prefer as far as an AB day, an AB week, or a teacher suggestion, because of course the AB is the option that aligns with the contract. So we did give them an opportunity to give us that feedback in addition to the brainstorming they did at their building meetings. As we look, it's the 5.5 out of 7 was about 50-50. The 5 out of 6 was about 30-70, so 30 against 74, or excuse me, 70 against 34. And the 4.5 was actually 74, 30 against. So increasing class size was the teacher's preferred option. As they ranked it though, the rankings also provide a score with some weighting within the survey. And the first choice again was the 4.5, with the second choice being the 5.5, and the third choice again in both instances was moving to the 6-period day. So That was the feedback we had, and the goal of that, and in our conversations with middle schools, I think it's important to note, a lot of the conversation is about preserving that 7-period day, preserving the opportunity. How does schooling look different from elementary to middle? How are we allowing kids to have safety nets and relationships and connections, as well as having choice and trying some things that they may or may not know they like. And then, so that when they get to the high school, they're prepared to make the choices that they need to make and to start to narrow their focus. So that, I think part of what's important to note is that we're really looking at providing an option to give us time to go back to our community to support that 7-period day programming, and assuming that the budget could support, the preference would be to maintain that 7-period day as it exists today. It would give us an opportunity to reset and reprioritize, just kind of refresh that in that moving back to a 7-period day. If we can't do that, our commitment to our teachers and our administrators would be to work together to say, under the budget constraints and the efficiencies needed in a 6-period day, what's the best opportunity we could offer kids? How can we uphold the things that we prioritize? How can we look at core and on-core and provide the best student experience possible? We just can't possibly do it in the time frame that we have in front of us right now to the degree that we want, so that we can make one transition would be the goal.
My understanding is that if the middle school stays at the 7-period day, then they would still be able to offer language as a choice. I would just suggest that if that is the case, and considering that high school kids are going to maybe have a hard time getting that requirement, when it's time for those elementary school kids to register for middle school, I know for both of my kids, and this was a few years ago, but they were extremely discouraged from signing up for a middle school language. Like, it was going to be the worst decision of their lives. They shouldn't do it. It's going to be so hard. It's going to be in your transcript. And that wasn't either of their experiences. I mean, I think the middle school language teachers do a really good job of making sure that kids are able to get through that successfully. And so I would just hope that the counselors would maybe be more supportive of those 5th graders when they're registering, so that they can get that language before they even get to high school.
I would like to speak to that a little bit. With 6th grade, we're just trying to let them know what the workload is and the responsibility, because it's select few 6th graders who can handle it, but we have several 7th graders and many 8th graders who start their language. So you don't have to start in 6th grade, that's all we're saying. You can start in 7th grade and get through Spanish too by the time you finish with middle school.
Exactly, because I have 2 kids, and when my oldest one went, she started as 7th grade was the earliest you could take it, and they said, oh my gosh, don't do it. And then
Actually, we started 6th grade.
Well, but at the time when she was in middle school, you couldn't 7th grade, and then, or maybe even in 8th grade, but they told her, and then my other one was a 6th grader when she started. And I understand certainly that some 6th graders won't be able to handle it, but 7th and 8th graders probably can, and the counselors just haven't in the past been supportive of like steering kids in that direction. So I'm just saying that because the high school, if the high school really goes to the 6-period day, we just have to make sure that the middle school kids are maximizing their opportunities at that level too.
Right, and if they take Spanish and have music or personal wellness, that's all they would get on the 6th grade.
Well, and that's what I told my oldest, is that she's like, well, I don't have choices. I'm like, well, you made your choices, and this is what you're taking. Right? You chose language and you chose music, and those were your decisions.
And I think that is one of the concerns with the 6-period day at the middle level. It really not only hurts students' choice, if we would have to move immediately without having the time to really explore and create a different opportunity, it's going to eliminate, they're going to be choosing music, or they're going to be choosing exploratories. They're going to, again, it's going to be almost a double hit to world language, because those elective opportunities will go away or will be minimized to a semester depending on the choice a student makes. So again, trying to keep those choices broad and provide opportunities to explore, as well as kids self-selecting some choices.
Right. And my whole point is just to make sure that they really are maximizing their chance to choose. I mean, don't make the decision for them, let them decide.
Yep, and I think with allowing kids to now consider that in 6th grade, that messaging would be different for our 7th and 8th graders, as they have some elective room in there to make those decisions.
So it sounds like from the survey that teachers overall are supportive of the choices of the 7-period. It's just depending on whether we would do it through increased class sizes or whether we would do it through the 5.5 out of 7. Was there any feedback from parents in the room on that Wednesday, from parents as it related to the increased class sizes?
Ron, we didn't, at that night, we didn't
Talk about that at all?
didn't bring up much of that, because at the time when we looked at pros and cons of the middle school, we were kind of operating from a level of, the board has tried to stay away from that increase of class size, and 4.5 is significant, and I think to, make sure Amy's point, like, we haven't even had time as a candidate to look at kind of be able to present you pros and cons like we did the other two of that. But just even quickly looking at my numbers tonight, for example, if I was to look at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science, we're running like 21 to 32 a section right now in those, so that's what she's talking about when we say we're kind of taking from one to give to the other. So we would drop from like 8 sections to 6 sections. And so you are going to be looking at more than 4 or 5 additional kids in our core classes. So I think if that's something you want us to pursue, I think the 3 of us would ask that, we have some time to take a look at what are the pros and the cons, what does that look like to how many teachers would need to be traveling. East and Pioneer are smaller, and so the impact on traveling, are we traveling core, what does that look like, do we even have then 3 teams, like, those are things that I think we want to be able to provide for you, if that's an area that you as a board say, we want you to look at that, that'd be something we want to provide.
Before we go any further, Chris Commerce, I think, had a question or a comment in the back.
Thank you, Amy. I just had a quick comment. First of all, I'm grateful for all the work that these folks have done on this at all levels, high school, middle school, and elementary. But real quickly, I think that a lot of these considerations, teachers as they serve students and the families of their students, really thinking about possibility and sustainability in our values. And I think a lot of this conversation, which is brutally heartbreaking, might be helped if we could talk about the restoration of what we have this year, looking out in the future. As we look around the metropolitan area, Lakeville is the only district I'm aware of that has returned to a 7-period day. And schedules could, 4-period day. What we're really getting at is how can teachers and students have the time in a day that allows us to do the work we're currently doing. And that recognition, whether that's a statement in terms of these are the cuts we're approving February 24th, and God willing, when we pass an operating levy, these are the things that will be restored. And I believe that could be the basis for a campaign that would meet some of the needs of our community, and we desperately need that, and I know you've got a very difficult job. Thanks for the time.
Well, and I think that's a concern I actually have is, given the political nature of our district, on what's happening, I don't think we can assume that we're going to pass an operating. And so what I'd really challenge you to do is, regardless of whether we do a stopgap this year or not, I would challenge you to go back and figure out a solution that gives students choice and keeps that, workload manageable to teachers. Because while people in the community are willing to disparage our community for their own political gain, I don't have any confidence that we're going to be able to pass any kind of levy going forward. So we need to do the work to come up with a solution that is going to be manageable. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but so it sounds like we have a stopgap solution for our, or whether we increase class size or we do this 5.5, a year from now, I'm gonna need a more permanent solution. And I guess my question about the class size is, do we even have capacity? Because some of those rooms are pretty tight. So I'm not convinced we can get another 5 kids in some of those rooms.
Yeah, sorry. I think that there are some of our classrooms that would be big enough for that, but by all means, not all of them. I can think of some specific math classrooms in East. I can't speak to Pioneer or West. Other classrooms too that become difficult is like our orchestra classes and band. Those already have a lot of students in them, but it gets really difficult if we're increasing class size even more to get more kids in those classrooms too.
I think too, the encores, so that's why we max out like some of those computer classes or Project Lead the Way, because there are only 34 or 35 stations, right? So we're either gonna invest in more stations, which is, doesn't help the bottom line, or we have to think of, and we've done it before, it's not impossible, like the rotating, you have a partner and you're not on that station every time, with those type of solutions. So, and at Pioneer, yeah, we'd be, Lisa and Amy, you're both more familiar with that. We would be crunched. We'll make it
You
work.
would be crunched.
But I think you'll see some of that flexible seating where there's coaching areas and those type of things would have to go away, and we'd have to go back to good old rows and those type of things.
Also, at our meeting last week, I just spoke with some teachers afterwards, and there's been a little divide here between the 5.5 and the 6, and we're a very cohesive, great cultural building, and I think it was, people are looking for some type of compromise, and they're thinking the 4.5 students kind of takes care of that, so they're still united, but I'm not sure it's what's best for kids. I'm not sure the community would support it at all, and I'm not sure you as a board would support it. That's why our middle school bus team from the beginning never came up with it.
I think there's two things that we should follow up on. Lisa, the commitment that we made as we talked to our teachers last week was, because we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know what the future holds, that by doing a stopgap, of course, the hope and the goal would be that you could restore a full 7-period day. But we also made a commitment that we would need to make a plan so that we could have a purposeful option that provided the best student experience possible in the event that we need to move to a more efficient schedule, much like the high school. That it really allows us to create 2 tracks or 2 paths forward so that we have the best option we can for our kids in either case, because we won't know, it'll be the same kind of timing we face this year. We wouldn't want to wait, and we made a commitment that that would be a collective group, that we'd include our staff and our administrators in the district working together and really studying, looking at what options there are out there. How can we create efficiencies in core and on-core to provide the best opportunity? So that is a priority and would be part of the plan. Ron, you also had asked the question about parent feedback, and I think the principals addressed that. I think one of the things that would be really important if we want to move forward, kind of weighing in, is it the 5.5 or is it increasing class sizes by 4.5? How do we communicate that to parents, and how do we give them the opportunity and make them aware of the 3 community sessions that are coming up? Because I think it's really important that we can speak to those questions and concerns or things that people like about the idea, so that we really have that holistic picture. Right now we have a lot of feedback from our staff. Like Dana said, the administrators haven't had a great deal of time to say, what are the pros, what are the cons, and to go back and check that with their staff to say, is there anything we're not thinking of here? But that's work that we need to keep doing, and if we're giving both consideration, we'd want to get that communication out.
I just gave another parent tour today, parent-student tour, a 5th grade girl at St. Hubert's. They live in St. Bonnie. Their 2 oldest go to Chan High School, and they're looking at open enrolling at West. And one of the first questions they asked me was about our class sizes. I'm always able to tell them that we keep our core classes, especially math, science, and language arts, under 30, and that some of our encore classes are higher. Even if we jump by 4.5, I think our encore, I don't know how anybody voted, but our encore are already sitting at 38, 39, 40. So they're probably reassured that we're not moving them up to 43, 44. Where our core teachers are looking at more, definitely hitting 34, 35, so that they're not going up another 5.
Well, and being in that 6-period day room, the 6-period day will potentially work for us because students will have more choice in the middle schools. Because students will have taken a STEM class and go, "Oh, I love that, and that's the way I want to go." Or they're taking a music class and say, that's the way I want to go. Because they have those opportunities in the middle school. So I'm a big proponent of having those options in the middle school. But just like every other cut that we're proposing, it's not going to be all good for kids. So if we can kind of, again, if this is a stopgap, that's fine, but come back with a solution that reduces that budget and keeps options for kids. And I don't know if there's a solution out there. I'd love to.
So I'll just share as well in thinking through and listening to some of the conversation tonight. Actually, I had a nice conversation with Amy Ledoux today on the 5.5 versus some of the class size or versus the 6-period day. And I pushed her on why not the 6-period day. Her response to you was much nicer than it was to me in that conversation.
That's the way it should be.
But it was really helpful because the context was the 6-period day works at the high school because they can do a 0 hour, and it doesn't work the same at a middle school to do the 0 hour because of transportation and other issues, right? So immediately going to a 6-period day, you are going to eliminate, for the most part, those foreign language opportunities. You're going to reduce the music and band and some of the encore opportunities. It also is going to impact our students from La Academia as they move into West and some of those options. So that was like the first really good, beyond just how it feels at a middle school level, like programmatic impact to students. So she did a nice job of really pushing back in a way that made it clear to me that I don't think going to a 6-period day would be a good option for us. So, and I also hear, Jenny,
Plus, there are more core classes in middle school than there are in high school.
Correct. So, and I hear, Jenny, what you're saying about quality, and I understand those concerns, and Fred, around class size. And it's certainly, Lisa, as you talk about not being able to count on the next referendum. So putting it in that context, if we do class size now, where do you go from there? Your next step is only the 6-period day, which we're already saying is a significant impact on those programs for students. By doing the 5.5, it does give you the option to do some things around class size down the road if you needed to. So again, just something to consider as we still have to process. And I have a concern about class sizes of 35 at the middle school and the impact that would have on discipline, on classroom management, on just, again, grading those papers and just on physical space, right? And I think we need more time to kind of work through some of those options.
Okay.
Thanks for your work.
Okay. So now let's move on to East Union. You can see the representatives on that side. So Mr. Meyer, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. I didn't take a count, but I imagine we had between 80 to 100 people at our East Union session. The first thing that I would say is that we have, I think probably in all of our groups, but certainly in the East Union group, we had very passionate people, and they love their school. They are passionate. I heard several stories about people who purchased their homes after doing research about where they wanted to live and where they wanted to send their schools, and made decisions specifically to come to our district and specifically to the East Union elementary school area because of the research that they did. So a lot of people were very passionate, and understandably were distraught with seeing East Union on the list, not just this time, but what they viewed as kind of a regular occurrence. As we got into budget challenges, all of a sudden East Union would pop up again. And so the other thing, and something that I appreciated about the feedback and the time that we had, is that they had a lot of questions, but also a lot of people with some got creative in bringing solutions forward. And so there was talk about fundraising and whether they could raise money to be able to offset some of the reductions that we were facing. You know, throwing things out like doing boundary changes to bring more students into East Union. And so, you know, they came wanting to find a solution, understanding that we had budget challenges, and they still wanted to ensure that their elementary school could continue on. There was some questions, good questions about things like, you know, similar to as we talk about 6-period day or 7-period with a 5.5 teacher workload, and what would happen if we were to pass a referendum in the future. So questions on if we closed East Union now and we passed a referendum, could we reopen it? So just good kind of technical questions that they had. But ultimately, the kind of the sense was people love their school. And I think probably if we go around to most of our schools around our district, we'd find families that would say the same, because we have great schools here at Eastern Carver County Schools. But certainly was not lost on me the passion that they had, and I know all of us have continued to get messages over the last several weeks about that. Also the other thing that did come up with was the understanding that it's not, certainly it's the 570 or whatever, the 49, but also that there's significant deferred maintenance challenges that we have at that particular building. And so that is part of the kind of the long-term look at East Union in terms of viability moving forward. So those were kind of, I don't know if Jackie Johnson took notes. She did a great job. I don't know if there's anything else from
Jay's in the room too.
Jay's here as well. Chris, I think, as well, if there's anything that I missed. Okay.
You know, I think this is tough. I've been doing boundary changes longer than all of you. And I think in my 13 years of doing that, I've never heard a parent say, change my kid's school. You know, and stories about, you know, moving to this district and moving to a specific neighborhood for their school, you know, is a common theme that I've heard over the years. And I know it's really challenging. It's really challenging moving schools, you know, and I've had other conversations with folks in the room. And, you know, at the end of the day, because right now I got, it's 120 kids in the school. 40 of them would be out of the school by the time this came into place. So it's really those 80 kids that would be significantly impacted by this. So I know it's a tough thing. Dee Dee, can you answer some of the questions around deferred maintenance? Because there was some thought around, we didn't have a lot of deferred maintenance items on the list. So there was some feeling that, well, therefore it's good to go. So could you give us a little bit more information on? Yeah.
When we did our facility task force and we brought in experts to look at all of our buildings, including engineers and architects and construction managers, to really dig into our schools, we have 2 schools that really need a fair amount of deferred maintenance, and that would be Chan Elementary School as well as East Union. Chan Elementary has some uniqueness with its roofs and the rooftop units and just maintaining those. But East Union also has some major renovations that need to occur, whether it is updating, you know, useful life of flooring, for instance, and HVAC systems, and there's some code things that if we were to have the appropriate firewalling, those would need to change with some interior windows. So there's just a number of things. That amount that is necessary to bring that up to where we believe it should be is close to $5 million. So,
How much is the building worth?
Well, depends on whoever would buy a school like that, but you know, it's probably around $1 million. You know, the county puts their assessment on what they think evaluation is. So it's a small school. You know, it's on 6 acres roughly, and it's not one that we can expand. I know the mothballing is up there, and everything I know from conversations. If you mothball a school, open it back up, now you do have to bring it up to all the standards and requirements that are met. So that means instantly a $5 million increase to improve that school. So does that help?
And the other thing is, I know that when we did the boundary changes, I'm reading here in the booklet that was given in the last boundary revision, East Union families were the most affected group compared to other communities in the district. Wasn't that the time we closed Chaska Elementary, and how many students?
Yeah, so, we didn't close.
Yeah, but we
Chaska L.
repurposed, but we moved, what, 600 kids out?
It was about 540 or so, yeah. So Chaska Elementary schools then went to other schools. We used Chaska L for the La Academia program, which was growing and taking students from all over the district for that program. So yeah, that school, a number of other schools had some changes within their boundaries as well.
Significant changes.
Yeah.
And I just remember being on the phone we did try and move some neighborhoods into East Union.
We did.
And there was significant pushback.
That's right.
Significant pushback into doing that. Can you tell me, because we actually have more kids in the East Union boundary.
We do.
But aren't attending that school. Can you give me the numbers of that?
Yeah, there's about 90 students that live within the East Union boundary that are not attending that school. So their parents and children have made other choices, whether it's private parochial school, charter school, or it's other schools that we have within our district. So some are, like, say, at La Academia, maybe they're at Carver, Clover Ridge, so they've made some other choices as well. And then we have probably about 10 out of that 90 that are open enrolled to other schools in Minnesota, not within our school district boundaries.
Right. I just know, and it's not fair because it's a great little school, but I do know because my kids went to Chaska Elementary, and once a school gets older, it is more difficult for parents. They do tend to want to go to the nice, bright, shiny new schools or somewhere else, and so that's a challenge. I think my biggest concern with keeping East Union open, quite frankly, is their cost per ADM is almost twice as much as any other school in our
for the core costs. Yeah.
For the core costs. Can you explain that, why that would be?
So when you have fewer numbers of students, you still have to operate the school. You still need a custodian. You still need to heat it. You'll have a principal, secretary, nurse, all of those things. Those are part of what we call our core costs for running a school. And so when you have fewer students, that cost per student goes up. And so East Union is about twice as much as the other schools. We have, as I mentioned, I think at another meeting, we have about 1,600 to 1,800 for some of the larger, bigger schools such as Carver. And then some of the other schools that are maybe a little smaller, like Chan L, for instance, might be around that $2,000 mark. But with East Union, it's about $4,400 per student on the core costs when you're looking at that.
I'd like to speak unintelligibly about East Union because I'm an East Union mom.
Yes.
And I was the art adventure lady, secret reader lady, and my kids went there. And so I want to speak to the parents here. I get it. But I have 2 children. And that school and Gay Guyton and Shannon Abad and everybody there was the most perfect school for my child. And it did not work for my son. Because we have choices in this district, I had to pull Will out. He was a big fish in a little teeny pond. And I moved him over under the guidance of June Johnson, thank goodness. We had a good, strong principal in a school that I got Will, he needed more kids. He needed a bigger opportunity. And I was so lucky in this district to have both. And so, while I understand the angst and the horror of closing a school, I also understand how important it is to have those options for kids. So there is no easy reason. There is no easy answer. Like, I couldn't even imagine. This is going to be the hardest decision I've made. When my daughter, when my daughter graduated, she asked for one teacher, her first grade teacher from East Union.
at our graduation. And then I'm gonna have to close the school, but then I'm like, well, but it didn't work for Will. So I understand their passion, but what I'm struggling to get my head around is that it's not the only school in our district. And we have fantastic schools, fantastic educators. So while it may feel like the end of the world if we have to do this, and I don't know that we have to, what I do know is that we serve kids, every kid. We sat here and looked at this fantastic program tonight, and I actually thought, oh man, I want to go here. Like sometimes when we go to all these schools, I'm like, I want to do this. I'm like, maybe I should go back and get my kindergarten license. Like, this is awesome, you know? So every school is awesome, and it's unique, and it has opportunities, but I understand their passion. I get it. But passion doesn't balance a budget. And so I sit here and I don't know what to do. I appreciate their passion. And I just want to say there's nothing wrong with having passion. There's nothing wrong with being a mother lion or a father lion for your child. I just don't know what the right reason, what the right answer is. And I just wanted to share that with you. This is not something that I'm making without a heart. So I just wanted to share that.
When I was on the board, and well, there were 4 of us on the board that had kids go through Chaska Elementary, and that was a very, very difficult decision to make. But as a board member, I don't have the luxury of being a parent. And, we have to do what's best for all 10,000 kids. This is a big chunk of change. It's $500,000 every year. If we didn't do this, what are other options?
Here's some options. So as you mentioned, it's $550,000. You could choose not to do anything, and you would lower your fund balance by another 0.40%. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you could consider some of the following. These are just ideas off of that list, okay?
Just real quick, we lowered the fund balance in 21-22 by 0.4.
Correct.
Because that would be the first year of the
Yep,
studies.
yep,
Okay.
yep. You could increase class size at the elementary. It would need to go up 0.82 students across the district.
But that actually wouldn't affect East Union kids. It would just because they don't have enough kids in each grade. So it would really just affect the other 4,200 elementary school. Right.
Yeah, or they'd have to be doing some teaming at that school.
So that doesn't seem quite fair.
So that would be about 5.3 teacher FTEs. You could increase classes across the entire district, not just at the elementary. That would be about 0.44 students. Again, about 5.37 teaching FTEs, getting you to about that 550,000. You could do one of those ideas on the list was increase the minutes to the day and reduce the number of student days by 3. That would work initially because you could do it for just transportation, but you would still have contractual things with the teachers as far as the number of days, so that wouldn't be the savings. So the amount of savings is less than what we showed on that screen earlier. You could increase the walk zone, so increasing that would save 130.
For all students, though?
Yep, the whole district.
The whole district.
Whole district, yep.
That's a huge impact to kids.
Teacher and special assignment, the instructional coach piece, that again, I think has to do with part of the contract, but that's 156,000. Small amount is doing away with district paid ACT. So
Which would impact all of our
high school kids. Yeah.
And I think that's my struggle. I mean, and I said that to the parents who were just honestly so respectful and so kind and really wanting to roll up their sleeves and work on this. And I get it. I do get it. At the end of the day, this will impact 80 kids. But we have 10,000 kids.
It's probably more than 80 because you have families that moved into the community. I'm sure we've got little ones that aren't in school yet.
True. But we're already getting phone calls from parents who are going into kindergarten saying, where should I send my kids if East Union is closing? So
Dee, just as a point of reference, there's 124?
121.
121. What is the instructional capacity of the building?
We've had as many as 200 students in that school. Maybe even a little bit more, but it's around 200.
If you had 200 students in that building, what would the per student or per ADM, you know?
I don't have my calculator on me, but I would guess it's somewhere around 3,000. It's still going to be more.
It's still going to be more.
Yeah, it's still going to be more. Yeah.
I would bring the cost of 2720 and the building cost to
2720. So close to 3,000. Yeah.
And that doesn't even account for the fact that the building is old and needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
No, I understand. I mean, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I mean,
So
this is a toughie.
And as you know, you kind of alluded to this earlier, shifting students from one school to another does not say
Guarantee that they're going to go to that school.
Well, it doesn't also reduce any costs,
No.
right? You're just,
No, I
we're
agree.
still.
I mean, it's like,
No, I know. I'm
you
just.
People are looking at utilization,
Mhm.
right, as an operational metric, and you're trying to, well, we can just say, well, it's operationally underutilized, maybe some other buildings are overutilized, right?
Oh, yeah.
Shift them, right?
But if we're increasing class size, the other buildings will have more space as well.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
So how does that work as we look at East Union? So one of the things that was discussed as we looked at our facility task force was East Union with its deferred maintenance and what's the long-term prospects of that school. And part of that was we knew that we were in an enrollment growth, which is what prompted the new elementary school in the referendum. If we close East Union and shift those kids into other buildings, what does that do for our elementary capacity at our elementary schools?
Well, it lowers it overall by close to 200, right?
Well, where does that put us in terms of, with our projection for growth in our elementary, which I know has shifted a little bit because we haven't had the enrollment growth that
Right.
we initially expected, but where does that leave us in terms of our facility capacity?
I don't have that number for you, but I can get that for you before we meet at East Union. I'll get that for you.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful just to.
Yeah.
Because right now we know on the elementary level, we're a little under 100% instructional capacity, right? So if we take out 200, what do we say, there's 4,300 elementary students? So, you know, yeah, so that's just.
No, instructional capacity is going to increase a little bit because of if the class size proposal goes through. So that helps a little bit, but that helps us now. But what about in the 5-year projection?
No, I was thinking more just from a facility standpoint, the instructional capacity is the buildings have instructional capacity regardless of how many students are there, right? So that would be, if we increase class sizes, that's going to increase utilization of buildings. It doesn't change the capacity of the buildings. Does it? I mean, as I understand the concept.
Sorry, I was looking for a number.
Anyway, that's fine. I mean,
Okay.
I think that's just a follow-up that helps us to understand some of those metrics and really some of that.
And I think about, I mean, as difficult as this is for these parents and students, I mean, their kids would have an opportunity to go to a bigger school with, you know, more opportunities, more diversity, and be exposed, you know, to more programs. So it's, you know, and again, I know it's difficult. I mean, yeah, and for some it isn't. But, you know, it's a challenge because you're right. It doesn't balance the budget. And, you know, back in the day when this has come up over and over and over, and back when we had 200 kids and people would say we should close the East Union, I'd say, well, what are we going to do with those 200 kids? But we don't have 200 kids there anymore, and we do have Carver Elementary, and so we have more instructional capacity, and I know that we're growing. But we do have opportunities to increase in other areas that would actually be cheaper than opening up East Union, or than keeping East Union open. Yeah.
Well, I think it behooves us too. Jenny, you said it very well. I was struggling with wanting to say what you said. I think it behooves us, though, if East Union were to close, that we as a board make sure that there is a plan to help these kids transition into wherever they're going. And it's not just, well, here's Johnny, he used to go to East Union, good luck, kid. And I don't even know what it looks like yet. I'd leave that to the people who have a better handle on that. But if it does happen, we really, and it can't just be some old board member saying, giving lip service till we got to make them feel good. It has to be a real well thought out plan that they know they're walking into another community. Yes, it's a bigger community, but it's a community that's going to care about them and nurture and all the other things that East Union is noted for that we feel is special there. It's special other places too. And while emotionally I might not want to face that if I were going through it, intellectually I do understand that my kid's not going to be thrown out because or treated differently because they came from the country. And
yeah, it doesn't look much like country.
Country, but I'll give you that. I won't get into that at all.
It's a pretty nice neighborhood, actually.
But it can't just be, okay, let's do this today, and now everybody is assimilated and feels good about it. We're talking about the uprooting of a community, not just a school, but a community. And that school is that community. And that means there's a lot more to it than the math class they're taking and the science class they're taking. And I know we all agree to that. It just seems that we have to remember that when we're planning for the future in terms of what we want to do if in fact East Union does close.
I mean, I will say, and Jeff, if Jeff were here, he could probably speak to, and maybe he will next time, you know, he was at Chaska Elementary when his kids were there, and they moved those kids, his kids, to another school. And, you know, this district has done this before, and they've done it very well, you know, with moving teachers with the kids so that they'd have those spaces, keeping that boundary together so that they wouldn't be completely split, obviously, you know. I don't know what the boundary would look like, but, you know, we'd have that discussion, you know, as well. And I have been involved in a lot of boundary task force, and we've talked about keeping neighborhoods together so that those kids who are very tight-knit because they know each other, you know, would likely come together and know those. And let's face it, this school, you can walk into any school in our district, and I'm telling you, every time we've done a boundary change, no parent ever wanted to move their kid, and I get it. But I've never, in following up with them years later, they've all said their kids are fine. And their kids have grown, and their kids have had opportunities to make friends and do things that they didn't before.
Thanks to the fact that that's a unique community. And it's, well, you know, we're a destination district, that's a destination community because of its unique attributes and the size of that building, that community. I would, you know, and this may not have any value, but I do remember I've only served on one boundary or attendance area group, but I do remember quite vividly, I think, was it Jan Bowler?
Bueller, yeah.
Yeah, who
she was great.
Who was on like five. Yes. Five for, I don't know why she felt the need for that penance, but she was on 5 boundary committees, and so she had seen it many times over, and she said, you know, it's really hard for parents, but you see the kids and they're just so resilient, and they don't miss a beat. You know, the vast majority of them. So for what it's worth, that is some perspective on changing schools.
Yeah,
so.
It's not easy.
Anyway,
it's not easy.
Just a couple pieces.
Yeah. For what it's worth, that is some perspective on changing schools.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's
So just a couple pieces that I'll add in. I know all of you have gotten a lot of feedback around this, around multiple issues, but a lot around East Union. Lisa and I did have a chance to meet with some parents who are here tonight. Great conversation. It was a good opportunity, I think, for us there are some misconceptions out there. I think the annual savings of 500, whatever that, 49,000, I think there was a perception it was a one-time savings, but it's actually a yearly savings. So it's good to be able to talk through that. I think to clarify, and really trying to put it into perspective of like, why are we talking about East Union now? Okay, because we didn't talk about it much during the referendum. It was in that kind of year 3. We didn't close it in 2015, and for good reason. If we had, Carver would have opened over capacity, right? So why now? And part of that is obviously the budget impact. We have the capacity impact that's in that building in terms of its size and location, and also the long-term facility maintenance, which we've talked a little bit about here. And so it's good through that conversation that really East Union as an elementary, because it's that single section building, it's only 7 acres, and any elementary we do today would have to be 20 acres. So it's not a site that necessarily we would do an addition or build something bigger on around it. And so from, in looking at that perspective, it's not in the long-term plan for the district. And I think the parents, as we talk, we're very understanding about that. So just like we're going to talk about all of these, there's all these things we have to weigh and consider, right? As we talk about the middle schools, as we talk about the 6-period day and the impact, and there aren't a lot of great solutions. And I think our conversation and what I've heard from those parents, which you've probably heard too, is not, and I want to make sure we're clear on that, it's not, should we not close East Union and just leave it open? It's when do we close it? Do we close it in that year 2, or after a referendum would pass and we build a new elementary? Is that time? That's what I think we have to wrestle with, that question, right? And we certainly need to do some more of that as well, because there are implications to that. So we're not going to see in year 2 that savings of 500,000. That would come in down the road. So as you look at that 5-year projection, if we did that, those savings would come in later, and we'd have to see where that balanced out. Do you do other things in the meantime, or do you just make that decision and close it? In terms of changing boundaries, you can't necessarily just close East Union, pick up all those kids, and put them into Carver, because it'd be over capacity. Yep. So now you're impacting the other buildings around that, right? And then I would assume that Chaska, that location that we had put in the plan for the last referendum, would be the plan for the next time. Because of where that's located with Carver, that's going to impact those next boundary changes. So I think that's something we have to wrestle with in that long-term implications, as well as you're going to have some significant boundary changes to do that, and then you're going to do them again when you open that next elementary. Again, we have to put all of those pieces and make that decision, and that's what makes it hard, right? I have no doubt wherever those kids end up, they're going to have a tremendous experience. Any single building, anywhere in this district, they're going to have an amazing experience. We saw pieces of that today, right? But again, it's the question of timing, and those are the pieces we want to answer for you. So as we make that final recommendation, as we go through these additional community conversations that we're going to hear more from, and that's what we need to be prepared for.
And that's, I think, is when we're growing, we don't have a plan yet for elementary school. And that could impact us down the road in ways that might be worse than the impact right now for the savings of $550,000.
I mean, I get it. I mean, I think my concern my biggest stay awake item with the East Union is that we're going to have a catastrophic incident, and we'll have to dig into money in order to keep that school open. And then what do we do? Because it isn't in the long-term plan. And I struggle with that going forward. I mean, I guess I wasn't paying close attention, but the numbers there are so small. And how are we going to make up for That's $565,000. And again, I mean, we can add on to Carver Elementary without a bond.
You could choose to do that. So go
Without
from
board
a
approval. Yep.
currently 720 capacity to, I think it was another 125.
Yeah, without a voter approval.
You could.
And how much would that cost?
The addition, looking at it about a year ago, was around $11 to $12 million to add on to that school. Because as you recall, the core areas there made it conducive to add on to it, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, for me, it's about looking in the long term for that, because I don't see filling it up as an option, because we have a 45% of the people in that boundary are not staying in that school.
How it works, just like you don't have a perfectly set of kids coming into a classroom like Amy described earlier, we don't have the same thing in neighborhoods, because neighborhoods turn over, they, you know, number of reasons, so, yeah. Okay, anything further? Okay, let's move on to other concerns and suggestions, and in that room we had Amy Logue and Jenny Stone. We have a few items listed there on the right-hand side, but maybe you guys want to talk a little bit about that one.
Was other, so it's a little random. There were about 40 to 50 people. Community members, teachers, employees, and students engaged staff with questions, concerns, and suggestions around a variety of issues. What was clear is that people were motivated by many different factors to attend and participate. Some parents wanted to get a more detailed explanation as to how a particular budget cut would affect their one student's experience. For example, how and at what level will gifted and talented staff be cut. So it was very specific to their experience. Many wanted to convey their disappointment and dismay that the cuts would affect the livelihoods of both licensed and paraprofessional staff. And some even questioned why staff should even be included in budget cuts. Some parents asked how they could support programs. So some came offering things like, how can we give to a foundation? Can we look at raising fees, a paper program like people had suggested, paying for music, and even looking for corporate sponsorship for extracurriculars. So some people came with some fundraising ideas. A few community members questioned the entire district budget-making process and suggested that the process from budget to the referendum to the cost containment process was not transparent, and even suggested that the published budget did not accurately convey our district financials. Other community members were concerned for the future optics. When can we go out for a new referendum? Will this affect our ability to attract superintendent candidates? So they were very concerned about what this made our district look like to the outside. Staff, community members, and students questioned how the budget cuts would affect teaching and learning, from how would personalized learning be impacted to how does PSEO and online classes through an outside provider affect cost containment. So they asked about PSEO classes and online classes and their cost. And overall, though a few were still questioning the validity of cost containment at all, most were seeking clarity and offering inputs and suggestions around staffing, the quality of the district programming, and what they could do to maintain the reputation of excellence. So we had a little bit of everything. I don't know.
I would add, there was a question about how you can kind of promise to negotiate a soft pay freeze, like the, I mean, how can you just, you know, promise that you'll be able to negotiate that? So that was something that.
It's a great question, because we can't promise it. If you heard me, I said we'll work towards it. So, yep.
That's why it's on a bigger list of a bunch of things.
Right.
Well, that's a big number, so if we can't get there, then
it is a big number. It is a big number, and if you know that in year one it was whatever, that 600,000, and then the next 1.9 million.
I don't think people were clear either, and maybe you could clarify that versus the teaching staff in year two versus everyone else. Who is all those other bargaining units?
Everyone else that you can imagine.
Administrators,
Everyone, custodian,
principals, everybody else. It's the first year, and teachers are the second.
Right, paraprofessionals, school nutrition, now that's a different fund. All community service, that's a different fund as well, and not part of those calculations, custodians, paraprofessionals, clerical, thank you. I knew I was missing one. It was everybody. We, across the whole district, looked at every position.
And the challenge you have with this process is everyone wants to cut their department.
That's
right. Yep.
Right? And, you know, so first on the process, the staff should be involved. I know everyone says we should operate like a business. I don't know what business has board members directly, you know, defining what the cut should be, or for that matter, the low-level employees. It's management. That's the job. That's what management needs to do. They propose the recommendations. They run it. They deal with it. That's a customary process, and from everything I understand, and I sat in on a couple meetings, that's what we did. That's normal course. In terms of the transparency, I would love to get examples of what people say we can do for transparency. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can. I know there's people that question that. It's a loaded word. What does it mean? I would say we are audited, we are regulated. We provide, you know, prodigious reports. We have people tell us that the reports are so big I can't make anything out of it. Well, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know, not enough, too much information. But we have an incredible finance staff, and you know, we've been recognized. We've had clean audit after clean audit, never a problem. We've had recognition for the quality and the depth of the reports that we provide. So I want to make sure, you know, if you have ideas and suggestions how we can be more transparent, happy to do that. The other thing is people don't understand information doesn't just appear. People have to go and compile and digest and review and produce and communicate. So that in administration that everyone wants to cut, right? And it is 3 point whatever X percent, 0.2, 0.3%. That is a valid number across a standardized metric compared to other districts, and which we are near the bottom of. If you want more reporting and all that kind of stuff, that's great, we can do that, but that takes people to do that, and that's people that aren't in the classroom. So, I mean, we have been doing the same practices since I've been on this board for 9 years. And the transparency word, we've been lauded for our reporting, our transparency until the last year. And there are groups that don't agree with some of the decisions we've made, and they want to throw out the transparency word. Again, give us specifics. What specific information would you like? We'll do our best. I'm going email after email. People in this room, I'm sure, have sent us 5-page emails with literally like 30 questions in there. Pam, Dee Dee, Kaylee, every one of these people, they go through and they thoughtfully respond to every single one of them. They don't just happen. These people are busting their butt, and it hurts, you know, it's killing them to do all this stuff because they'd rather be working on constructive things, like we all would. But people have to understand, there's a, you know, these emails come in, we take them extremely seriously, and there's a lot of work that goes into them, and that's work that can't be done to do positive, constructive things. But we're doing the best we can, and again, I speak on behalf of the board. We love any suggestions for transparency. We can say, this district is doing this, that could be great, bring it to us. We will love that. So that's mine.
I just want to add in, I'm a numbers person. I teach AP calculus. I was this district's multivariable calculus teacher, the only one, busting kids from both buildings to teach us. Numbers aren't numbers. I have sat down with that budget and I don't understand it sometimes. It's different from accounting. I can balance my checkbook, I can manage my IRAs, and I'm not saying this is but when I go through and I'm trying to look at things, when people send me emails and I'm trying to go through and figure out, okay, where did this, and we're so heavily mandated, and things that are reported over here are now called this,
And it's not that I don't have 3 different graphing calculators and my computer up, and I actually have to look up some of the terms and go to the, it's so difficult to understand that I want people to know that all they have to do is reach out, come in, and sit down. Because you've been great for me answering questions, and I do numbers, like advanced degrees in numbers, and I look at this and go, yeah, Colin D. You know? So I would suggest that if you have it, it's not so easy to just look at and say, here is a number like your checkbook, you know, to make sure that you come in and you ask those awful questions, but to expect that it's much different, that I have learned in my only 1 year here, that it's much different than a business. It's much different than a household account. It's so heavily mandated by the state, and they are acronym happy.
Well, everyone's acronym happy.
Well, and I would add, it's not just mandated by the state. Our district goes, and Tim mentioned it briefly, our district goes above and beyond, and our finance team goes above and beyond and provides not only this board, but our community through the budget document, as well as the CAFR at the end of the year. And we get awards through the Association of School Business Officials. That's a national award that there's specific criteria that we need to meet in our reporting and are being transparent in our financials in order to qualify. And we are one of just a few in the state of Minnesota who has that high distinction of both of those awards. And so our team is excellent in the documents that they produce.
What do you know?
And I don't know anything.
I mean, people don't know that Ron is the DD for Osseo Maple Grove.
And I will say that woman right there.
Not nearly as good as the DD either.
Yeah, that woman right there is considered the top
I am
business administrator. Yes, you are.
Okay, moving on.
I just wanted to say that if people had questions,
Yep,
that it's natural, because, you know,
Yep.
it's a very confusing document, and I don't think, you know, when you think about government, it's bureaucracy, it's top-heavy, it's very confusing, the way the state has said you have to do school budgeting. So I would just have people say, come in and ask you. Come
Right.
and meet with you, sit down and say, you know, these numbers don't appear to be lining up for me and I want to understand. But for me, it's not that it's not transparent, it's that I lack a degree in school finance.
Yeah.
I have one in calculus.
Yeah. Well, it is very complicated. It's not as easy and straightforward. There's different methods, as Ron knows, of how we have to report. We do fund accounting. Remember, there's different funds. There's a number of different funds, and sometimes we're reporting on just the general fund. Most of everything we've been talking here is just the general fund. And sometimes when we report the numbers that you see, it includes everything, which can be debt service, community service. It can be our self-insured funds that are included in it. So it makes it look different. We are required to report based on UFARs, which I mentioned previously, and those are the categories that we are required to do. And we also have to submit things to the state of Minnesota in a certain way. So there's a number of things that, while on a state of Minnesota report or something you see in a different document looks different than what's in the CAF or in the budget, it's because it's required in that manner, and it is complicated. But I do find that most times, like Jenny or someone else from the community wants to understand this better and come in and either meet with Pam or myself, they get a better understanding and can have their questions answered. So I always welcome that, and I invite people to come in, and you know, it would make things a little clearer for those people that can have concerns about transparency. So
in this session, did we get any good questions, ideas? I mean, any good suggestions
you know, a couple
that we
of
could
things that really came out to me was talking about student choice, the 6-period day, personalized learning, and kids doing PSEO and online classes and how that moves around a little bit. When I was with secondary redesign, that 7-period day was thought of for the kid taking the band, and that, you know, we wanted to offer that. That was part of it. And there are some students that meet all the graduation requirements and they don't have as many classes, and they maybe take online classes in PSEO, and a lot of community members said, who pays for that?
Right.
And we're like, we do.
Yeah.
And so they were wondering how that would be affected, and I didn't have an answer. And then a student did ask about personalized learning and the model and what it would look like.
Mm-hmm.
you know, teacher's choice through that. So there were some really good questions with teaching and learning about, you know, how everything would be affected. So.
Yeah, and then one other question that we weren't entirely sure of the answer is, because we do a lot with comparable districts, either on paper or reaching out to them. Have we reached out to other districts who have found themselves in this situation to kind of find out how they've handled big budget cuts? Like, you know, how they solved the problem or temporarily?
I did not go to that length, just in conversations with other school districts, and Ron can probably chime in too. You just understand that it's got to be a collaborative effort, and we got to all work together to get to that point. So every school is unique in what they serve and what's important to their school district, so it really does fall back onto the schools to come up with it. But I don't know, Ron, if you have any other thoughts.
The only other thing that I'd say is that I think all districts that go through similar things, because such a big chunk of our budget is people, is going to affect people. And so that's, how do you collaboratively come together to do what's best for the students and try to limit the impact on people as much as possible. That's
76% of our spend.
Well, I think one thing that I've learned through all the emails, and I've, you know, been doing this a while, is, you know, in fairness, people are pretty myopic, you know, and they're going to say, you know, my kids are in elementary school, then elementary budget cuts should be spared. If they're in middle school, then they should be spared. If they're in high school, they should be spared. And you know, and that's what parents should do, because they're going to advocate for their kids. But that's why we're a board, right? Because we have to take our blinders off, and we have to look at the district big picture and look at what's best
10,000 kids.
for 10,000 kids. And again, I know it's difficult when you're one of those kids that's going to have a parent, one of those kids that's going to be impacted, but we have to kind of, you know, look at that big picture piece of it. And so it's sort of taking the feedback, listening to it, you know, and is there ways we can do things better? Absolutely. But a lot of what's happening now is, what's hard about this process is the sooner we can make these decisions, the sooner those people out there, all leaning on the back wall, standing and leaning, can implement these decisions in a way that that lessens the impact to kids. And I know it's really frustrating that, you know, again, we might be moving through this quickly, but we got to get this done so they can do their job and take care of kids and take care of teachers and tactically answer some of these questions and address some of these issues.
Okay, ready to move on? I'm sure everybody in the audience is. Okay, so we wanted to let you know, besides that session on January 29th, we also provided opportunities for email, voicemail feedback. So those numbers are up there on the board of what type of feedback we got through those two means. So you can see that the majority was about East Union, although grad requirements came in kind of second behind that. So before we move on to the last couple slides, I just want to say one thing, and I heard earlier it brought forward. As a board, you need to consider, as someone mentioned, about if a referenda comes back on the ballot at some point in time, what things might be added back. It is something imperative that you really spend some time on, because as you know, we spent down some fund balance this year, about $4 million. Previous year, about $1.7 million. You knew that we would need to cut in the future, even with the $5 million. So if you just refresh your memory, $5.6 million for the question one, about $600,000 or $650,000 was intended for the operational cost for that new school. Okay, so the remaining $5 million was to help bridge the gap of our deficit between the revenue and the expense, okay? So I just want to remind you of that, and don't need a response, just we need to think about that when and if that time comes, okay? So moving on, just real quick, these are the...
Real quick on that last slide.
Yes.
Is there anything new that we haven't already talked about in those voicemails or messages?
No.
Okay.
No, and I think there's a summary of these that you have access to. So you can look at those. So yeah, nothing. Briefly, these are the guiding principles for the budget development, and Kaylee helped help me with the words that get in there. But just looking at our policy, our mission and long-range plans, increase efficiency and contain costs while minimizing impact on classrooms, engaging staff at every level and every building to identify the cost savings, do some outside the box thinking, you heard some of that going on tonight, and then provide the best possible education for each and every student with the resources available. So you heard a little bit about those upcoming meetings. Thursday, February 13th from 9 to 10. We tried to vary the times of the days so that it provided different opportunities. Any community member can go to any one of these sessions. It doesn't need to be in that particular, you have to be in that particular community. So February 13th, 9 to 10 at Chaska Community Center. Tuesday, February 18th from 4:30 to 5:30 at East Union. And then Wednesday, February 19th from 1 to 2 at Victoria Rec Center. And then, as we've mentioned, there's also the opportunity to continue to provide feedback to those people.
So just let me summarize too. We will continue to take feedback. We have the additional sessions in the community. So we have between now and the 24th. At the 24th, we are going to bring a recommendation for you to approve or reject as a board. So again, we'll have, as things come up and you have questions, but right now, what else do you need? What additional questions do you have that we need to answer for you? What data would be helpful that we can provide to you? So again, as we think about preparing you for that on the 24th, and there's a reason we can't continue to push this off.
No.
Because we've got to get kids registered for courses. You've heard all of the things like Lisa mentioned. Once we get to the implementation, there's all kinds of things that have to be worked through in that process, right? So there's a lot of things that have to happen, even just from changing to the 6-period day and the scheduling and working through those options with kids. So lots involved in that. So we really need this decision to be made on the 24th. We need to make sure you're prepared for that. So anything else that we haven't talked about, questions, data, concerns, that we need to make sure we're pulling together for you.
Can I get a cost of a 0 hour adding that back in? How much would that cost? Like, what if we did, 6-period day, and then could we think about maybe adding a 0 hour or just 2 days a week, or what that would
At high
look like?
school or middle school?
High school. I know there's transportation or maybe no transportation costs, what that would look like. I would like to look at adding back opportunities. And then I'm also concerned about raising fees. I want to make sure that we're not increasing any opportunity gap. I would like to make sure that we still have monies available for people if they need to, free and reduced lunch, scholarship, that those are all still there. That's not going to change. When we need to fund that more, so we'll still have those. I'm very concerned about opportunities for kids with increased fees for athletics and music and being in the theater and stuff like that. Okay.
I presume we can get back to you in the next day or so. You don't want all requests tonight?
18 hours.
I have a question about the feedback too. I've heard some concerns that the feedback is being sieved, that's not the right word, but through the district, and we're not seeing it all. But it's all going there because I open up every email. So you're just putting them in there? Okay, because they are in the original message form. I didn't understand how to open them at first. Are you answering ones that have specific questions, or are you just putting them in there?
Yeah, we are answering.
Okay. So I've been reading them, but I just wanted to make sure that it's just everything's being put on there for the board to see.
Yeah.
It's not being sorted out. Okay.